So today I'm talking about a bit of a real topic. Kind of just for the sake of, if anybody wants to know, because a lot of people have been asking me, and it's hard to articulate whenever people are speaking to me in conversation. But so as you know, I studied to be a doula, and kind of just how my education went. I graduated from high school. Then I went to college at George Mason. I studied psychology. And during my time studying psychology, I really became connected to some basic fundamentals of the human experience. The hardest thing for people who study psychology is that, some of the basics of life. Like for example, in engineering, there are some PEMDAS. I'm sure it's just like a babe. Like, PEMDAS is like the basics of life. That's the basics of our subject, and you got to know that at minimum. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. PEMDAS, like, you have to know that in the back of your brain. For psychology, some of those things are like a human being has to eat in order to thrive, and they have to eat healthful foods. If you eat unhealthy foods, it could impact your hormones, the way you think, the way you learn, etc. Then another thing is, like, a human being needs to have sleep. It's like PEMDAS. And yet you go out into the world and it's like, we're sleeping, we're dead. And you're like, well, that'll be soon, the way you're living. According to my studies, right? According to what I studied in school. Then you get out into the real world and they're like, you don't really need to eat healthful food. You need to put whatever you can into your body. You don't really need to sleep that much. You need to work. But the PEMDAS of my studies say that we must sleep and we must eat. I even took a class on psychology of stress and health. And I remember feeling so resentful in that class because I'm like, okay, yeah, I see what we're learning, but like, how applicable is this to surviving in American society? It's not. Like, I remember feeling so frustrated in that class because it was just like, it seemed like, well, that is just not even... I'm not as school, so I shouldn't be so negative. But that's not what's being perpetuated in society. Like, in society, they'll be like, well, you don't really need to sleep. And also in psychology, it says that, for example, if there are certain disruptions in a person's ecosystem, that can affect their sleep. It can affect their ability to consume food, digest thoughts. And we have the DSM-5. Right? I think in other fields like engineering, there's a bunch of equations like Ohm's law, right? You guys use Ohm's law, right? Well, we have some laws in psychology too that are just so disrespected in terms of society. Society does not respect psychology as a science, and then all of a sudden people go to like manipulation, and it's like, baby, hold on, I'm actually gonna stop my walk to calm down. We're not using psychology to manipulate into a weapon of mass destruction. We are attempting to use psychology to understand the dysfunctional ways that people are living in an attempt to heal them and help them out. So there's a whole book of things. Some of them are things you're born with. A lot of them are environmental, though. There's a whole book of things that are environmental that, to a person who studies psychology, it makes sense. And I won't even just say psychology, I'll say health. Because in health, even in the healthcare fields, the physical therapy, nursing, physician assisting, you learn certain things. Like, for example, drinking water, you must drink water. Dehydration can lead to fatigue. You will not really be able to retain information. And you see my demeanor, it's a bit different today. But it's like when you go into the field and you attempt to just explain, okay, people ask, what's your philosophy on life? So I didn't study philosophy. I took one philosophy class. But I understand that one's philosophy is kind of like the system behind the things that they do and the theory of mind behind it. And so my philosophy is that I studied psychology, that when it comes to women's health, especially during pregnancy and after childbirth, it's a very unique time, and there are certain formulas that Like, for example, nursing or any type of involution requires proper nutrition, which includes hydration, which includes access to healthy foods, which includes access to the ability to prepare those foods. And we also look at, when we're looking at the postpartum period, the fourth trimester, the quarantena, within the field of birth, which isn't necessarily psychology, but that's healthcare in a way, right? It's healthcare, and it's healthcare. That was kind of like my capstone, so to speak, in that I got my doula certification at the end of my psychology studies, then went back in the summer and finished up some classes. I did like social work classes and things like that. So I'm in school thinking, what I'm studying really matters. It could truly change lives, because I am looking around and it doesn't seem to be apparent. People don't seem to know these things, even though they are being presented as obvious. I could really help society by positioning these values as important and positioning myself as somebody who can contribute towards the positive outcomes. I still have hope. In my time since graduation, though, and in my time since having a child, I've realized that society is at a complete detriment when it comes to the understanding of what psychology is. I think that when people think psychology, they think, are you going to hypnotize me and make me do something that I don't want to do? No, unless you don't want to drink water. And I'm telling you that you need to. Okay? Unless you don't want to go to sleep. Unless you don't want to know, and here it is, right? Unless you don't want to know where these beliefs came from that are within you, that are incorrect in terms of a healthy constitution of a human being, if you don't want to know where those came from and why they are wrong, and how you can improve your mental health, improve your outcome in relationships, improve your experience here on earth. Because that's essentially what it is. Now, on a micro level, we talk about learning, memory, behavior. These are some other branches of psychology that are really important. And the core, though, is this idea that the mind, the brain, the core, though, is this idea that there is a mind and there is a brain. The brain is a muscle. It's a physical part of our body that contributes to our whole ecosystem. If you look at the brain, what is the one organ that is a part of every single bodily system? The brain. The brain is in the muscular system, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, the lymphatic system, the endocrine system, the brain. Okay? It's really important. And then this theory of mind is the theory of mind relates to a sense of self. It relates to a spiritual or metaphysical presence that's connected to our whole being. So in somatic psychology, they even talk about how the body remembers, in a sense. So how our feet, for example, can remember certain things. That's the theory of mind. And by remembering, if we look at the cases of PTSD, sometimes people may have certain reactions to something. I'll just make it general. They see the thing and they have a reaction. Let's just say their whole shoulders tense up. How did your shoulders know to do that? That's the whole idea of theory of mind. And if we look back to the brain, there's also a very physical explanation. So that's the part one, because this is getting long.